Calling Stranger Things a cultural phenomenon honestly doesn't do it justice. Eleven and her friends didn't just win fans. They took over the global conversation, launched massive careers, and reshaped pop culture. But none of that came without consequences. Before we get into it, hit that like button and share the video, because today we're looking at how two brothers created a small, nostalgic passion project that slowly turned into a machine powered by Netflix. A machine that ended up pushing its young cast to the limit, especially the most recognizable one, Millie Bobby Brown. And what went on behind the scenes was intense. Tears, bullying, harassment, mental breakdowns, even official complaints. And the audience was never made aware of many other events that occurred. You'll hear a lot of names in this story, but everything really starts with two brothers, Matt and Ross Duffer. Today they're seen as major creators, but early on nothing seemed to land for them. At 26, they directed a post-apocalyptic thriller called Hidden for Warner Brothers, and it completely flopped. After that, they wrote Wayward Pines for M. Night Shyamalan, but the show didn't make much of an impact. And when they tried to pitch their dream project, an adaptation of Stephen King's It, their ideas were rejected right away. At that point, the Duffers felt like their time in Hollywood was running out. So they decided to take one last shot. If they were going to say goodbye to the industry, at least it would be with a project that felt personal. The idea really clicked after they watched Prisoners. They loved the tone and the characters, and it made them wonder how a story like that would work as a series. Not a basic TV show, but something that still felt like a movie. That thought opened everything up. Around the same time, they started thinking about their childhood in Durham, North Carolina. They grew up living on Spielberg, John Carpenter, Star Wars, Ghostbusters, Stephen King, pretty much every major piece of 80s pop culture. They were like their own version of the Goonies, except instead of hunting for treasure, they were making home videos with their friends. All that nostalgia pushed them to write a project called Montauk. The story took place in Montauk, Long Island, in 1980. A boy goes missing, and his friends, his mom, and a local cop start looking into a nearby military base called Camp Hero. That's where a girl with psychic powers escapes after being used in secret experiments. She becomes the key to finding the missing boy and stopping the people behind it, until they realize there's something even worse out there, a creature from a parallel dimension they called the Upside Down. The Duffers originally imagined Montauk as a movie, but eventually realized it worked better as an 8-hour story, a series that still felt like a movie. They didn't just write a pilot, they put together a full 20-page pitch with character descriptions and details about the town. They even made a video using scenes from their biggest inspirations, E.T., Stand By Me, Poltergeist, and sold the whole idea as a love letter to Steven Spielberg and Stephen King. A mix of real emotion and supernatural danger. They were feeling good about it. TV was in the middle of a new golden age, and big shows were proving that long-form storytelling could be just as strong as anything in theaters. Their concept also stood out because it targeted younger viewers and pulled from the Montauk Project, a conspiracy theory about secret government experiments. But everything fell apart fast. Every major network in Hollywood passed on the project, and they all said the same thing. If it was for younger audiences, it needed to be lighter. If it was supposed to be scary, then it should be only for adults. Nobody believed horror, sci-fi, and adventure could work together for a broad audience. After all those rejections, the Duffers felt like they were right back where they started. That's when they looked towards something that was just beginning to take over the industry: streaming. And one name stood out above the rest: Netflix. Back in 2012, Netflix made a big move. Instead of just buying other people's content, they started creating their own. Shows like House of Cards and Orange is the New Black proved they weren't afraid to take risks. That's when the Duffers realized Netflix might be their last real chance to bring Montauk to life. In mid-2015, they finally got a meeting with Cindy Holland, one of the top decision makers at the company. They showed her everything: the pilot script, the pitch book, the reference video, and she loved it. She thought it was different, bold, and still something audiences could connect with. She wanted the show, but she had a few conditions. First, the story was set in Montauk, which is a real place. That meant permits, paperwork, and a lot of extra costs. Second, she suggested moving the story to a location that would be much cheaper to produce, somewhere like Georgia or Indiana, which meant they'd need a new title and a new town. So far, the Duffers were on board, but then came her last note. The pilot was too dark. It leaned more toward full horror than anything inspired by Spielberg. She asked them to soften the tone a bit. The brothers hesitated. It felt like she was asking them to adjust the project they cared about the most. For a moment, they thought they were about to lose another opportunity. But after taking a breath, they realized she was right. The horror elements might overpower everything else. So they found a middle ground, the perfect blend between Spielberg and King. The town became Hawkins. The year became 1983. But there was still one big problem left: the new title. It needed to feel strong and instantly pull you in. The Duffers thought about some of Stephen King's book titles, like Needful Things, and pretty quickly landed on the name that fit everything they were trying to do: Stranger Things. Once that was locked in, Netflix approved a budget of $6 million per episode for the first 8 episodes. It sounds huge, but it was actually less than what other big shows were getting at the time. House of Cards was around $9 million per episode. Still, the Duffers didn't complain. They always saw this as a smaller, more personal project, and a tighter budget meant they'd have more creative control. After years of rejection, the project they cared about the most finally got the green light. And the next step would become one of the biggest talking points of the entire series: finding the cast. For the kids, the Duffers wanted actors no one really knew yet. For the adults, they planned to bring in a few familiar names. So in mid-2015, they held huge auditions. Around 1,000 kids showed up. Even though the brothers had already rewritten the pilot, they still had everyone read scenes from Stand By Me to capture the right vibe. For Mike Wheeler, the leader of the group, they quickly landed on Finn Wolfhard. He was obsessed with 80s movies and pop culture, and he had the exact attitude they pictured for Mike. Will Byers, the kid who disappears, went to Noah Schnapp. Lucas Sinclair went to Caleb McLaughlin. But the hardest role to lock down was Dustin Henderson. At first, the Duffers imagined him as the most serious kid in the group, until they met Gaten Matarazzo. The Duffers and Netflix had their boys, but they were still missing 11, the girl who escapes the lab and ends up joining the group. They saw hundreds of auditions before landing on a young British actress named Millie Bobby Brown. Millie was just 11. She'd worked on a few shows, but nothing that really moved her career forward. After losing a role on Game of Thrones, she moved back to England with her family, convinced her time as an actress was basically over. So when the Stranger Things audition came in, she wasn't sure she wanted to go through another disappointment. On top of that, she didn't fully understand the pilot. She couldn't tell if it was horror, sci-fi, or drama. And hearing she might have to shave her head only made her more anxious. But her parents pushed her to give it one more try. So she sent in a tape performing an emotional scene and a monologue. No crying, just pure intensity. The Duffers watched it, looked at each other and said, "It's her, or we're not making the show." The Duffers and Netflix had their young cast, but there was one thing they still needed to figure out: chemistry. So before filming, the brothers set up a week-long boot camp. They watched classic 80s movies together, played Dungeons & Dragons, and did loose script readings. By the end of that week, the kids weren't acting like strangers. They felt like a real group of friends. With the kids locked in, the Duffers moved on to the adult roles. For Jim Hopper, the rough-around-the-edges sheriff of Hawkins, they went with David Harbour. He'd been working in Hollywood for years, usually as side characters or villains, and he was tired of being boxed in. When he read the pilot, he didn't hesitate. For Joyce Byers, Will's determined and overwhelmed mom, they reached out to Winona Ryder. In the 80s and 90s, she starred in classics and became a cultural icon. But everything changed in 2001 when she was caught shoplifting in Beverly Hills, and suddenly Hollywood didn't want her anymore. The Duffers didn't care about any of that. They remembered her talent, her presence, and what she meant to a whole generation. Ryder connected with Joyce immediately, and with the brothers' passion for the project. For Dr. Martin Brenner, the scientist behind the experiments on Eleven and the other kids, they chose Matthew Modine. In the 80s and early 90s, he was one of the most respected young actors in Hollywood, until Cutthroat Island, one of the biggest disasters in movie history, derailed his momentum. And here's a detail worth keeping in mind. When the contracts were signed, Netflix set the salaries like this. Every kid earned $20,000 per episode. Winona Ryder got $100,000. David Harbour got $80,000. Remember those numbers, because they're going to change a lot. Once the cast and crew were in place, Stranger Things was finally ready to roll. Filming ran from November 2015 to April 2016, with Hawkins recreated in and around Atlanta. For the Duffers, it felt like stepping back into their own childhood. A lot of the locations looked almost exactly like the Durham they grew up in. This was their last real shot in Hollywood. The pressure was huge, but they managed to keep the set relaxed and collaborative. They wanted the show to feel like an Amblin-style story, something made with heart, not a loud, effects-heavy production. That was their way of standing out from everything else on TV at the time. They also pushed for practical effects whenever they could. It gave the show a handmade feel, and it was cheaper. The Demogorgon wasn't CGI. It was a full latex suit with animatronic pieces, inspired by the monsters from Alien and The Thing. That same approach shaped the look of the 80s. The art team hit thrift stores and flea markets, picking up posters, toys, furniture, anything that made the world feel real. The goal was simple: make Hawkins feel like an actual place, not a set. The Duffers oversaw everything on set, but they focused the most on the cast, especially the kids. Their friendship was the key to making the show work. They joked around so much that scenes had to be redone constantly. And to keep that sense of innocence, the brothers didn't let them read the scary parts of the script. They only explained what the characters were feeling. Millie Bobby Brown was the biggest challenge. She shaved her head and gave the role everything she had, but because she was the youngest, she could only work 8 hours a day. When the 8 episodes were finally filmed, the Duffers moved into post-production. That's where the music came in. They licensed a few songs, but the real foundation of the soundtrack came from Kyle Dixon and Michael Stein of the synthwave band Survive. Inspired by John Carpenter, they created the score that would become the show's signature sound. With the season complete, Stranger Things was ready. Now they just had to hope people would actually find it. The Duffers were anxious. They'd put everything into this project, and they weren't prepared for it to be ignored again. And the cast felt that same pressure. For the kids, it was a chance to finally be seen. Winona Ryder hoped it would restore her credibility. David Harbour hoped it would show a different side of him. And Matthew Modine simply hoped it wouldn't hurt his career any further. Netflix rolled out a pretty standard marketing campaign. Nothing fancy, and nothing that really showed what the story was about. The Duffers and the cast did their part, though. In every interview, they talked about how much the project meant to them. Reporters praised the show on camera, but when the interviews ended, the brothers would quietly pull them aside, away from Netflix staff, and ask, "Be honest, did you actually like it?" Every journalist said yes, and many repeated it in articles and videos. But that didn't calm the Duffers. They'd already lived through this once. Hidden got great reviews and then disappeared. They were scared it would happen again. All they could do now was wait. On July 15th, 2016, Stranger Things finally dropped on Netflix. At first, everything seemed almost too quiet. The brothers even started wondering what they would do if Hollywood didn't want them anymore. 3 days later, someone from the team told them to check Stephen King's Twitter. He had just posted about the show, calling it pure fun, praising how well it captured the spirit of the 80s, and ending with a congratulations to the Duffer Brothers. The two of them were shaking. They couldn't believe it. Stephen King's tweet changed everything. Word of mouth took off fast. Stranger Things clicked with kids and teens, but it also hit home for their parents, people who actually grew up in the 80s. Suddenly, the show became the face of a decade that was already coming back into style. Movies, TV, music, fashion, everything was leaning into the 80s again, and Stranger Things sat right at the center of it. In its first 2 weeks, it became Netflix's most-watched show, pulling in over 14 million viewers in the US alone. It was all anyone talked about, at home, at school, at work, and when award season came around, the show made a big impression there too. The wildest part? This was just the start. No one was more shocked by the success of Stranger Things than the Duffer Brothers. Just a few months earlier, they were barely getting by in Hollywood. Now, this small personal project had pushed them straight into the spotlight. Their phones didn't stop buzzing, non-stop interview requests, and job offers coming from everywhere. The show changed the kids' lives instantly. They went from total unknowns to landing magazine covers and appearing at conventions like Comic-Con. Gaten Matarazzo enjoyed the attention, and he used it to speak openly about his condition, hoping to help others. Finn Wolfhard joined another 80s-inspired project. He played Richie Tozier in It Part 1, the same story the Duffers had once dreamed of adapting. The adult cast had their own resurgence. Winona Ryder experienced a real comeback. A whole new generation discovered her, and she embraced the idea of being a retro icon. David Harbour earned widespread praise, and studios suddenly saw him as a leading man. And Matthew Modine, after years of struggling, became a favorite villain for younger audiences. Everyone benefited from Stranger Things. But no one's rise was bigger than Millie Bobby Brown's. She didn't just become a new young star. She became the first major celebrity of the streaming era. Her social media exploded. Magazines wanted her on their covers. Brands lined up to work with her. She was excited, and the chance to help her family made her say yes to almost everything. Everything felt perfect for the people behind Stranger Things until the darker side of fame showed up. The Duffers were flattered by all the attention and the offers coming their way. But before they could even consider other projects, Netflix confirmed a second season. They were thrilled. It meant the company trusted them, and they had no interest in stepping away from the world they'd created. They even started imagining a 4-season plan. But the pressure hit fast. They now had to deliver something that lived up to the first season, or somehow topped it. The downside of the show's success also caught up with the cast. David Harbour loved being recognized, but almost no one called him by his real name. To most fans on the street, he was simply Hopper. For Winona Ryder, things were even harder. She wasn't on social media, but a friend eventually told her she was trending, praised by some, criticized by others. Her return to fame also brought back the old controversy that had once damaged her career. But the young cast was hit the hardest by the sudden fame. With the fans came the haters, people criticizing their hair, their bodies, even the way they talked or moved. Cruel memes started spreading everywhere. Not even Gaten Matarazzo was spared. Some people made awful jokes about his appearance. They tried to ignore the negativity but soon realized something even more uncomfortable. Some fans crossed the line too. Finn Wolfhard dealt with it constantly. His social media filled up every minute with intense messages from people calling him Mike, as if they couldn't separate the character from the real person. But no one went through more than Millie Bobby Brown. As she started getting offers for more mature roles, she faced backlash from fans and criticism from the press. She didn't address any of it publicly and leaned on her family and her new friends, who stayed quiet as well, at least for now. In just a few weeks, everyone involved in Stranger Things had seen both the highs and the lows of fame, but the problems were far from over. Season 2 was coming, and that's when things truly got worse. The Duffers were right to feel the pressure. Cindy Holland told them everyone at Netflix was thrilled with Stranger Things. Not even House of Cards had reached that level of popularity. Because of that, Netflix raised the budget to $8 million per episode. But they also wanted more ambition, more characters, bigger storylines, more creatures. The brothers agreed, but deep down, they felt their personal little project slipping out of their hands. They approached the new season the same way classic 80s sequels did. Bigger, darker, but still full of heart, the way Aliens expanded on Alien. They sketched out 9 episodes set in October 1984, 11 months after Will's rescue. Instead of returning to a normal life, Will becomes possessed by a massive tentacled entity the kids call the Mind Flayer. And that was only the beginning. New threats showed up too, including dog-like demogorgons. Filming took place from November 2016 to April 2017. The Duffers had always pushed themselves, but this was a new level. More sets, more crew, more effects, and a lot more pressure. It felt like going from a small indie project to a full-on blockbuster. And everything needed to work, because Netflix had already locked in an October 2017 release. They kept things calm on the surface, even though it felt like their own success was watching their every move. The pressure hit the cast just as hard. Netflix had doubled their salaries, but the kids knew that came with more responsibility. The Duffers, along with Ryder and Harbour, tried to keep them grounded. The brothers even used games during rehearsals to bring back the natural energy of Season 1. Every day was physically and emotionally demanding, but staying close helped them get through it. Still, some of them felt the weight more than others. Finn Wolfhard had to juggle filming the show with his work on it Part 1, which meant traveling constantly between sets. Millie Bobby Brown had just turned 12, and many of her scenes were extremely heavy. Isolation, anger, fear. In a lot of those moments, the tears you see on screen were real. They also had to adjust to the new cast members. The Duffers created Bob Newby, an old friend of Joyce who becomes her partner, and cast Sean Astin to play him. Yes, the leader of the Goonies. For Sam Owens, a more approachable scientist, they brought in Paul Reiser from Aliens. But the biggest new addition was Max Mayfield, the new girl in Hawkins. Sadie Sink, already doing well on Broadway, got the role. At first, she struggled with imposter syndrome. Joining an established cast felt overwhelming, but the crew and her new co-stars made her feel welcome almost instantly. As the season was getting close to the finish line, the Duffers and the crew found out that Netflix had just secured major merchandising deals. Nike, Lego, Funko, and even Super Bowl ad spots, where every second costs a fortune. By the end of that day, the brothers were so overwhelmed, they literally hid behind part of the set. The stress was getting to them. Like they had during every tough moment before, they leaned on each other, calmed down, and kept going. They wrapped filming and jumped straight into post-production, working even after internal screenings to get everything exactly right. Even with all the pressure, the Duffers and their team finished Season 2, but they still didn't know if fans would accept it. Expectations were so high that the goal felt impossible. The brothers were so exhausted that, at one point, they stopped worrying about the reaction altogether. When the season finally came out, it pulled in more than 15 million viewers, breaking the record set by Season 1. Stephen King, their most loyal supporter, spoke up again. It's like if It and the Goonies had a child. Dark, fun, and full of heart. Fans went wild for the bigger story, the character growth, and the new additions. Kids and adults fell back into that world. And that world had turned into a full brand, one that helped solidify Netflix as a global powerhouse. The success of Season 2 turned the young cast into major stars. Millie Bobby Brown especially made the jump to movies with a key role in Godzilla, King of the Monsters. But fame wasn't easy for any of them. The kids were hit by online haters and obsessive fans, to the point where some had to leave the internet altogether. The harshest attacks were aimed at Sadie Sink. People compared her to Brown and accused her of getting between Eleven and Mike. The Duffers defended her, reminding everyone that if anyone came between those characters, it was Max, not the actress. Millie Bobby Brown faced even tougher criticism. People constantly commented on her body, her clothes, and everything she did online. Rumors even started that she was dating one of her co-stars. Like before, she chose to stay quiet and leaned on her family and friends. But the pressure didn't stop. The Duffers struggled too once the reviews started coming in. Many critics praised the characters and the 80s atmosphere, but others felt the season wasn't as fresh as the first. Some even suggested the formula was starting to wear thin. The brothers couldn't ignore those comments, but they also knew they were running something massive. Could they bring the spark back? They'd find out once they began shaping Season 3. For the third season, the Duffers moved the story to 1985. 11, now adopted by Hopper and going by Jane, is trying to live a normal life. She's even dating Mike. But in Hawkins, normal doesn't stick for long. The group now has two new threats to deal with. More creatures coming out of the Upside Down, and Soviet scientists running secret experiments in town. To set this season apart, the Duffers pitched two main ideas to Netflix. First, the kids were now teenagers, which meant they could explore new emotions and more complicated relationships. Second, they wanted to bring in elements of body horror inspired by The Thing. Holland and the Netflix executives agreed, but pushed for even more. More characters, a bigger story, a larger scale. Netflix raised the budget to $10 million per episode and officially confirmed a fourth season. The young cast was excited, not just about the new scripts, but about their pay raise. Wolfhard, Matarazzo, Schnapp, Sink, and McLaughlin went from earning $20,000 per episode in Season 1 to $250,000. Millie Bobby Brown earned even more, $300,000 per episode, along with an even bigger role in the story. They were joined again by Ryder, Harbour, and the rest of the cast, plus a few new additions. One of the most important was Maya Hawke as Robin Buckley. She's the daughter of Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman, but she wanted to build her own career. From the very first rehearsals, she clicked with the cast immediately. During filming, the Duffers had to remind themselves that Stranger Things had grown just like its characters, and they had to grow with it. They now had massive sets, including Starcourt Mall, which became the center of the season. They stayed hands-on and demanding, but the emotional pressure was real. In quiet moments, they'd look around and think, when did our small passion project turn into something this huge? Constant calls from Holland and other Netflix executives didn't make things easier. Once again, the brothers tried to hold on to the spirit they had at the beginning, and they shared that with the cast, who stayed supportive through everything. The third season of Stranger Things premiered on July 4, 2019, and not even Independence Day could overshadow what came next. By the end of the year, Netflix estimated that more than 64 million accounts had watched the entire season. The original fans were still there, but an even bigger audience had joined in. The show wasn't just drawing from old pop culture anymore. It had become part of pop culture itself. Reviews were stronger this time too. Critics said the freshness that seemed missing in Season 2 had returned. For the Duffers, it wasn't excitement, it was relief. And as always, the young cast felt the impact the most. Wolfhard, Matarazzo, Schnapp, and McLaughlin couldn't walk anywhere without being stopped for selfies and autographs. Even the newer cast members were embraced immediately. Sadie Sink started landing movie roles, including the award-winning The Whale. And then there was Maya Hawke. One night, she went to the movies with her dad, Ethan Hawke. A man approached them and Ethan tried to politely ask him not to interrupt because he was spending time with his daughter. The fan replied, "I don't know who you are, I'm here for Maya." A funny moment, but soon overshadowed by something darker. A lot of the press claimed the formula was starting to wear down, and that all the references and effects were drowning the actual story. The Duffers struggled with that criticism. Many of those choices came from Netflix, not from them. As usual, the young cast took most of the attention. Haters said Matarazzo still looked like a little kid, while claiming the others looked like teenagers trying to act younger. Caleb McLaughlin had it even worse when he started receiving racist comments. And things were just as tough for Noah Schnapp, who was figuring out his sexuality, while social media kept making assumptions about it. But once again, the harshest spotlight fell on Millie Bobby Brown. The show pushed her to grow up fast, and she tried to turn that into something positive. At 15, she co-founded Florence by Mills, a beauty brand aimed at Gen Z. She also used her strong relationship with Netflix to launch projects like Enola Holmes. But none of that stopped the media, or the public, from obsessing over her body and her personal life. People said she looked too grown up, that she was moving too fast, that she didn't act her age. For the first time, Millie pushed back. She couldn't understand why so many people felt the need to judge someone else's body, especially a teenager's. Her co-stars and friends supported her, but the comments didn't slow down. And the hardest part? The biggest issue still hadn't reached the public. While Stranger Things kept winning over viewers, the people making it were running out of energy. Even so, they kept moving forward with Season 4. And if they thought nothing worse could happen, they were very wrong. In their first meeting with Netflix, the Duffers pushed for the show to take a darker turn. Holland and the other executives agreed, but reminded them it also had to be bigger and more commercial. Netflix had new partnerships lined up, and the budget reflected that. $30 million per episode. The brothers felt like they were part of a machine they couldn't slow down. Still, they kept thinking about their original plan. 4 seasons total. This was supposed to be the end. But before they could say anything, Holland told them the scripts needed to lead into a 5th season. Production didn't start smoothly. Filming was postponed again and again because of the pandemic. The Duffers used that downtime to polish the scripts. They picked up the story where season 3 left off, Hopper trapped in the Soviet Union. The season would include elements of espionage, but its biggest influence came from A Nightmare on Elm Street. They wanted a villain with the same psychological terror as Freddy Krueger. That idea became Vecna, a creature from the Upside Down with a disturbing human past. And to complete the tribute, they cast Robert Englund, the original Freddy. For the first time in a long while, the Duffers felt like they were reconnecting with the heart of the project. That feeling didn't last long. This time, production wasn't limited to Georgia. They also filmed in California and even Lithuania, where they recreated the Soviet Union. COVID protocols made everything harder. No shared meals, everyone had to keep their distance, masks on at all times, and no physical contact. The production dragged on for months. The Duffers kept asking themselves what they were doing. Part of them wanted to cry and go back to being kids making homemade videos, but they pushed forward, for themselves and for their cast. One day, they noticed Finn Wolfhard struggling to get his lines out. He was shaking. He was having a panic attack. They immediately got him medical help and paused all his scenes until he recovered. Despite all the delays, the Duffers and the team eventually finished season 4. But they were so exhausted that when it premiered on May 27, 2022, they barely had the energy to enjoy the success. The ones who celebrated the most were Netflix's executives. The company had been losing subscribers to competing platforms, and the return of Eleven and the gang was their biggest chance to bring people back. As usual, the spotlight shifted back to the cast. Finn Wolfhard dealt with fans waiting outside his house or crowding hotel entrances. Eventually, he became so overwhelmed that he hired private security for the night. Gaten Matarazzo faced something even more unsettling. People weren't making fun of his appearance anymore. Instead, he became the fixation of a 40-year-old woman who sent him inappropriate messages while he was still underage. This time, Wolfhard, Matarazzo, and the rest of the cast spoke out. They asked fans to respect their boundaries and called out the toxic behavior happening online. But once again, the harshest attention fell on Millie Bobby Brown. Everything she said or did was analyzed. Every interview turned into headlines. In one instance, she mentioned she doesn't really watch a lot of movies because she struggles to sit still for long. The media immediately asked Winona Ryder about it, knowing she felt differently, and suddenly tried to create a conflict neither actress wanted. Brown pulled back again, leaning on her family and on her new boyfriend, Jake Bon Jovi, the son of John Bon Jovi. By that point, the Duffers and the entire team were grateful for Stranger Things, but emotionally drained. They still had a 5th season ahead of them, and they knew it would be the last. As they moved into the final season, the Duffers faced another round of pressure. Cindy Holland had left Netflix, but the executives who stayed were just as demanding. They set an enormous budget, about $50 million per episode, making it the most expensive production Netflix had ever taken on. Then things got even harder. From July to November 2023, Hollywood shut down during the writers' and actors' strike. The Duffers could have cracked under the stress, but at this point nothing surprised them. They used the downtime to tighten the scripts, and once the strike ended, they went straight into production. Most of the effects were digital now, and more than ever, they felt like they were directing something far bigger. The cast felt the same way. After years together, the group and the crew felt like a family, and they made the most of their final days on set. Even before filming started, many of them were already stepping into new chapters of their lives. Millie Bobby Brown even married Jake Bon Jovi and asked Matthew Modine, whose career had fully recovered, to officiate the wedding. They still dealt with online hate and overwhelming fan obsession, but they assumed that once the show wrapped, things would finally calm down. When the Duffers finished the 5th and final season of Stranger Things, they also decided it was time to end their overall deal with Netflix. They wanted the freedom to work on new projects elsewhere, but Netflix wasn't ready to let them go. The platform had plans for multiple spin-offs set in the Stranger Things universe and insisted on keeping the brothers involved. With much more leverage than in the early days, the Duffers agreed, but only as producers. So what can we expect from the 5th, and likely final, season of Stranger Things? Well, the season hasn't even premiered yet, and the behind-the-scenes drama has already started. On top of the Duffers being burned out and openly considering stepping away, another controversy surfaced. Millie Bobby Brown filed a criminal complaint accusing David Harbour, her co-star and on-screen father figure, of mistreatment and harassment. These reports are still developing. If you're watching this and you've seen new updates since, let everyone know in the comments. Stranger Things started as a small personal idea from two brothers who just wanted a real chance in Hollywood, and it grew into a giant run by a massive corporation. Its young cast reached incredible levels of fame and paid a steep price for it. And just like Eleven and her friends, the people behind the show eventually learned something the industry rarely says out loud. Behind Hollywood's bright lights, there's a darker world underneath, one filled with pressure, chaos, and monsters that don't come from the upside down. Wicked was supposed to be Oz's big comeback, the musical event of the decade, with Ariana Grande, a lineup of unforgettable songs, and the promise of bringing back that old movie magic we all grew up with.